Okay, well, hello everyone. Good turnout here. Nice to see. So queen rearing in the piece. That's us. We're in the Grimshaw area. And I keep bees with my two sons, Andrew and Brendan. And we run about 4,000 hives for honey production. We winter singles indoors, and we raise about 4,000 queen cells and 3,200 mated queens, and we sell about 2,500 queen cells to other beekeepers. And there's a picture of me collecting some brood. So yeah, we winter everything indoors. There's a wintering room, and then we get them out in the spring. And then this is our first time that we get a chance to see how we're going to select our breeder hives. And it's before anything has been done to the hives. And we just go from the hives that have wintered over twice. And so we're looking at them. We're trying to avoid the drift hives. We're looking at the pattern and the calmness. And then each hive will, that seems like good pattern, calm, lots of honey stores. We'll do a mite sample. And we'll sample quite a few, maybe 100 or so of these high quality hives. And then we'll do a shaking test there, and we'll end up with 24 breeder hives. And yeah, I don't know if that's like a drift hive. That's not really one that we choose from. Okay, so early May we bring the breeders home and we set them up in our special boxes, which is, there's the picture. I can't quite see the pictures here. So we have an excluded area for the queen to lay in. That way we know it's how old the larva is. Quite often I have the guys help with the grafting, and I don't have to worry about if somebody's picking larva that's too old or too young. We know because she's just laid in that excluded area. That looks like my grandson Ben is helping me there. He's not a lot of help, to be honest. He's got a lot to say. And anyway, so yeah, we keep the queen on the middle frame, and we usually use each breeder for about 4 sets, and then we switch them out with the new breeder hive. And then the cell builders. This is kind of an old picture here, but so we set those up 4 days after we set up our breeder hives. We put 3 frames of sealed brood in, 2 frames of pollen, lots of extra nurse bees, and you have so many nurse bees, you open the lid, they're just hanging in there, and that's what you want. And then we feed syrup, put pollen patties in too, just in case. A lot of times you have a good pollen flow and you don't need the pollen patties. A lot of times you have a good dandelion flow and you don't need the syrup, but it's better to have some just in case the weather's poor. And then the other thing, we put the boxes underneath there, the colored ones, that's pretty much just foundation. Because I don't like it when the queen cells get webbed together with wax, so I always put lots of foundation in to make sure they don't do that. Get the bees drawing the foundation instead of webbing up the queen cells. And that's kind of frame of pollen you want to have in your cell builders. We have a pretty good pollen flow where we're at. As long as the weather's good, we have lots. But so grafting, we use the JZ BZ cups. They're simple, easy to use. I use the Chinese grafting tool, same reason, cheap, easy to use. We put 48 cells per frame and 1 frame per cell builder. And then we usually expect about 40 per frame. We graft on Saturday, or we make about yeah, we graft 10 on Saturday and 30 on Tuesday. I don't know if we have to be that specific, but basically it works out that we have our cells coming on Tuesday and Thursdays. That gives us Monday to get our brood together, and then we don't have to do work on the weekend if they come off Thursday. And the second graft is bigger because the second graft is the one, if we're going to sell our cells to other beekeepers, I do it on the second graft of the week. And we can put a new graft in the cell builders every 4 days, but because of us wanting them on Tuesday and Thursdays, it works out to about 7 days. And then each time that we put a new graft in, we check them for queen cells, give them another frame of brood with lots of bees on, and feed them again. The hard part there is looking for the queen cells on the brood. If they get out and then the queen comes out and chews a bunch of cells, that's makes you pretty mad. Using the queen cells, so we move them the 9th or 10th day. But occasionally you see a hatch cell on the 10th day. So I think 9th is probably better. But then you kind of want them to be as mature as possible. We've kind of tracked whether we take them off the 9th day or the 10th day. Seems like the mating seems about the same. Doesn't seem much different. And we make up a lot of different kind of nukes. And then the cell builders, we use it usually at the end of the year. We split them up and put a cell in them, and then they'll become nukes too. So we don't waste a lot of extra bees making queen cells. They get used up. Sometimes when we use our cell builders to make nukes, though, if the bees get too old, you get poor mating. But the options were blowing them out or shaking them out, and the guys really hated that because the cell builders get pretty cranky by the end of queen season because you're in them literally every day pretty much, and you get a lot of old bees and pretty bad tempered by the very end. They're good at the start. And this, oh yeah, we're talking about going by the calendar. So this was May 20th. I can't quite see, but there was snow literally up to the top of the boxes. We got a foot of snow, and actually that was a good thing because that year was really dry and we had terrible grasshoppers, and that foot of snow killed all the grasshoppers. So it was good, but we had cells and we had to put them in. And so we did. And there we are. You just can't be a baby about things. You just get them in there. And we probably had 80% mating on there. It was fine. The bees didn't drift around a lot. Okay, so briefly how we use them all. So we have 3-frame nukes. They're the first ones that come out. And we make them up with brood from the old queen hives that are, we call it blown up. Basically, we take all the brood out of the old queen hives just as a way of replacing that old queen. Our goal is for our whole outfit, we want to have either a new queen from the summer before or a new queen from this summer. So every hive, every one of these 4,000 honey-producing hives will have a new queen. So anyway, but the first nukes we have are these 3-frame nukes. We call them mega nukes. And we'll add a frame or two of brood to them after the queen mates, and they'll be almost as productive as a regular hive. Pretty close, and then you got a new queen going into winter. So it's a way that you can produce a queen in the spring locally and then have that queen for the next year as well. And then we make some 1-frame nukes, which just frame of brood in a single box and a queen cell, and they usually make about 30 to 50 pounds of honey, so I figure that's a good deal. That pays for their keep for getting into next spring. And then my son likes the names here. This is something called a phoenix hive because it's the old hive that's been stripped down to nothing, and then I guess just a handful of eggs and old queen, and then we'll pinch that old queen and put in a queen cell in that. And then those ones, because they have more bees generally than the one frame nukes, they make about 70 to 90 pounds of honey, which, again, you get a new queen, you get some honey. That's what we got. Styrofoam nukes, that's the picture there. They're those Taggart nukes, same as Curtis is using. We basically use those to, every nuke yard you have some misses, and then we bring some styrofoam nukes when we're checking, and we put them in the misses so that every pallet is full. All our lids are being used, and the styrofoam ones are just easy to carry around from yard to yard. So typical mating is about 84%, and we plan for 82. And if we have extras, we'll get some extra brood chambers to make them up. We found last year, it was an early spring, so we got going pretty quick. We had cells by mid-May, and those ones, they only mated about 71%. And I thought, boy, this is pretty terrible. And then we had a run where they were like over 90. And then at the end, they kind of tailed off again. So it depends a little on the weather, and it depends a lot on the weather, but it seems like we always get something. We always get some queens. And then when we make them up, we spray the brood frames with syrup to keep the bees from drifting around. Seems like a big problem with mating is you set up your nukes, and some of them, they just drift away, and that's, you put a queen cell in there, you don't get anything. So by putting the syrup on, by the time the bees clean themselves all up, they're settled in for the night. We usually do this in the evening, so they're settled down for the night, and then the queen cell probably hatches out the next day. Okay. Advantages of producing queen cells. So it's adapted to local conditions. So for us, we've been doing this 30 years, I guess. And so the queens that survive well, that we're breeding from, they must have adapted themselves to our conditions. Wintering indoors, being further north, they just seem like you just keep breeding from the ones that do well. It seems to make sense. And we find the main thing we select for is wintering, and it seems like they winter well. Anybody we sell queen cells to, they always say, yeah, these cells we got from you, they wintered better than my other hives, so I'm pretty sure there's something to it. And the queens are raised in good conditions, lots of nectar and pollen. It's kind of the natural time of year that bees would want to raise a queen. They're not flown halfway around the globe. Seems like they're less likely to supersede. Stronger hives at the right time equals higher production. Queens, I'm not sure exactly what they are. $40 a queen maybe by the time you figure in your losses. So you save that. And you control your own destiny a little more, I think. If you get a bad batch of queens, maybe through no fault of the queen supplier, they were held up at the airport or nothing anybody could have really done about it, you still got to eat that. But when you raise your own queen cells, you might have bad weather and it'll delay you a few days, but you'll always get good queens. And I put there, become a better beekeeper. You just, you got to really know how bees work and what they're doing to raise queens. You got to really understand the process, and it just makes it a little more interesting. Okay. So here's the thing. I'm not going to show a bunch of pictures to people without getting a couple pictures of my grandkids in it.
Looks like he was overworked.
Yeah, this is Willie here. We were checking, doing mite tests. He came out with me for the afternoon, and then he fell asleep in between yards. And you know how you go in between yards and you just about fall asleep, and you wish you could stay in the truck and sleep while everybody was working? You know, he gets to do that. I've been wanting to do that for years, but I always force myself out of the truck to do more work, and I thought it was a little unfair. Anyway, that's not really relevant, but I thought it was a good picture there. So a little bit of troubleshooting here. So small cells, you know, quite often it's lack of nurse bees, pollen, or syrup. I think if you get really big cells, and they can be a little smaller than that, and I've never noticed any difference. But when they start getting so small that they don't look much bigger than a drone cell, or they're kind of, you know, hockey stick shaped or whatever, then you've got a problem with your cell builders. They won't make great queens. So you wanna make sure your cell builders, lots of nurse bees, really healthy. Chewed cells, that's pretty much a virgin running around in there, and that wastes a lot of your time if you're doing that. Chewed cells and no virgin. Sometimes we get this the very end of the season with our cell builders. I think the bees just get too old and they're not chewing all the cells off the bars. They're just everyone is doing like 2 or 3 a day. They're just starting to tear them down. I think they're getting old. They're getting tired of raising queen cells. And I think it's probably a good idea to not run your cell builder too long. If it's like ours are queenless cell builders, so if you run them too long, I think the bees just get too old and you're kind of getting on the wrong side there. Poor graft acceptance. Bad grafting. Sometimes you get a lot of honey in the cell builders and it kind of squishes into the cups. Or a weak cell builder can do that too. Usually, like I say, out of 48, we pretty easily get 40. And I've got 2 or 3 different workers that help me with it. And after 2 or 3 times, they do just fine. If you're careful and you see the larva going in on your grafting tool and you see it going in the cup and you take your time, it's not really that hard of a thing to do. General underperformance, you don't want nosema in your cell builders. That'll affect them quite a bit. Or EFB. I always use fumagellin just to be sure about the nosema. EFB. Occasionally it can happen because the hives are pretty stressed, so I usually give them a bit of Oxytet too to avoid that. And poor mating. The biggest one is almost always too much grass. You put the nukes down and grass hasn't grown much and you think, oh, these will be fine, and then you come back 2 weeks later, the entrance is covered in grass and you have a bad mating. The grass has got to be down. Drifting hives, same thing. If you get a lot of bees in one hive, they tend not to mate a queen, and then you drift away from the other hives, they tend to not mate a queen very well. So you got to have them. That's why we use the syrup, and we do it in the evening. And sometimes I think it is weather, but it's usually like windy weather. I think it's bad. If it's just kind of rainy, they'll just wait. We've had them 22 days. Remember one year we were in a sweat because it was like 3 weeks and still all these virgins. And that was about 5 years ago. Anyway, a couple more days they mated and the queen seemed fine. So it can be a long time, some years, but if you're patient, they'll eventually mate. And questions. This is our youngest son, Ian, here. He's showing us how to exit a bee yard. Just wait. Right there. So anyway, questions?